Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Ducks, in which the Sharks have won 4-2. And I talked about coming into this game that this was more or less a must-win for the Sharks if they wanted any chance of making it to the playoffs, considering this was one of the few teams they have left on their schedule who was actually below them in the standings. And the Sharks put up a pretty solid performance in this victory. The game started off in the first period pretty much all Sharks controlled. It was Stefan Noesen scoring his third goal of the season, his second with the Sharks ever since actually I think it was his first game coming to the Sharks off of the waiver wire. And then Patrick Marleau made it 2-0 San Jose. Come second period, the Ducks started to really push back 5 minutes into it. Eventually the Sharks would get a power play. It would be a very, very bad power play, and the Ducks would get a shorthanded goal to make it 2-1 San Jose. But thankfully they get the insurance goal from Patrick Marleau, his 10th on the year, to make it 3-1. And going into the third period, San Jose is able to expand on their lead with Stefan Noesen. It's a third period that is, I would say, more leaning towards San Jose controlled, even though it wasn't dominated by the Sharks. And it would eventually be Ritchie in the last couple minutes of the game who would make it 4-2 for the Ducks. Somehow he scores from the penalty box, or at least that's where he should have been after punching Timo Meier in the face. But alas, the Sharks would still end up getting the victory and a very important 2 points. First thing to talk about would be Aaron Dell, as he gets the first start here after the All-Star break. He had a very good game, I would say. He didn't have any chance on the Kasha goal. That was just a beautiful move. However, not the best goal to let in on the Ritchie one, especially since a lot of Sharks fans are probably still on edge after what happened against the Washington Capitals just maybe a month or so ago. So there were a bit of, flashbacks to that moment after Ritchie scored the goal to bring this to within 2. But Dell did hold down the fort there. He made a few very, very nice saves. There were a couple very nice glove saves in particular. And when it comes to the next game coming up on Wednesday against the Vancouver Canucks, will Dell get the start again, or will it go to Martin Jones? I would bet that Aaron Dell will find himself between the pipes once more. And I would guess that until Dell either loses or just has a bad game, let's say a 4-3 victory where Dell wasn't all that great, he probably will get the starts until then. Next, I will talk about Dylan Gambrell, as he came back into the lineup for the first time in a while. Now, Gambrell was a player who was expected to be able to stay with the main roster for the majority of this season coming into the year. However, he wasn't really all that impressive. He didn't really take the steps forward that the Sharks were likely hoping for. And so while he had a couple of decent showings early on in the season, he would be eventually sent down to the minors. Now, I wasn't necessarily surprised that he got sent down to the AHL, but I was somewhat surprised that he didn't get called up sooner than this. He actually stuck down there for a couple of months, really. And I felt as though Gambrell was maybe one of the best options the Sharks could have brought up during this stretch of games, and yet they seem to just continuously ignore him. But he finally gets the opportunity here after the All-Star break, and he plays maybe one of the better games here for any of the Sharks forwards. He played very, very well. He had an assist on one of Marleau's goals, but he was a +3 if I'm not mistaken. And it was just a very solid game for Gambrell. He definitely earned his spot in the lineup. He will certainly be back in the lineup on Wednesday against the Canucks, and we'll see how much of a long-term play this could be. Once Couture comes back, the lineup will move back to normal, but that is still a couple of weeks away. So Gambrell right now, who knows, maybe he can end up at the 3rd line center or at least the 4th line center when Couture does return back to the lineup, if he can continue to play like this, because he had great chemistry with both Marleau and Marcus Sorensen, who they themselves also had solid games. Next, I'll talk about Brent Burns, who has really had just an up and down season thus far. More downs than ups, certainly, but there have been some ups, and here tonight I thought he was pretty good. I didn't really like his play on the Kasha goal. This one ends up deflecting off of him, unfortunately, but then he doesn't. I feel like he takes a bit too long to try and get back defensively, which allows this Kasha breakaway to happen. However, other than that, I thought Burns played a pretty solid defensive game. I thought he actually was able to jump up into the offense a few times, make some nice plays happen in the offensive zone. So it was a pretty good game all around for number 88. And that's, if the Sharks are going to make the playoffs, that's certainly something the Sharks are going to need. Brent Burns has been one of their players who has been underperforming thus far this season. And so if he can get back to the level that he was at in each of the previous 3-4 years for the Sharks, really just that one of the top defensemen in the league, then the Sharks can have some sort of opportunity here. And then next I will talk about Erik Karlsson, who, as was the case with Brent Burns, that has also been a very up and down season, maybe even with more downs than ups as well. Karlsson had that moment when he was first paired with Marc-Edouard Vlasic that they were looking very, very good for multiple games in a row, 7, 8, 9 games. Even when the Sharks were losing some, it was certainly not the fault of Karlsson and Vlasic, who were playing some pretty stalwart defense. However, we come back from the All-Star break tonight, and Karlsson did not look very good. He had a couple of decent moments offensively, so he's still able to be creative in the offensive zone, but just too many times he found himself getting walked around in the defensive zone. A really bad giveaway ended up leading to a great chance for the Ducks. I believe this was early in the second period, if I'm not mistaken. That could have cut the lead in half for the Sharks quite early on in the second and maybe turned the tides a bit in that game. And so there were certainly some mistakes from Erik Karlsson. As it continues to be the case, both Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson can't seem to be good at the same time, but hopefully that can get regulated a bit as we move forward, because as I said with Brent Burns, if the Sharks can get Burns back to that level, they'll have a good chance. But if they can also get Karlsson back to the level, which is one of the best, if not the best defenseman in the NHL, well, there could be some hope moving forward. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action, as I've said, Wednesday against the Vancouver Canucks. This was the team that they played going into the All-Star break, and they got pretty much dominated in that game, lost that one. And so they'll certainly be looking for revenge. The Sharks have played 3 games against the Canucks so far this season. They've lost 2 pretty badly, but they did have 1 win as well. So it's not impossible to take down this team, but it'll be tough. The Canucks are the leading team in the Pacific Division, so an important divisional game, and also the start of a stretch of games for the Sharks that are going to be against some pretty tough opponents. And this could really make or break the Sharks' season. Class dismissed.